everyone. I'm Destiny. I started dancing when I was 3, and I lived in Georgia, so I was doing competition dance for a while, and then I moved to LA when I was 9, and I started dancing at the Devion Dance Academy. From there, I started training at the Colburn School, and now I am dancing at PNB, Pacific Northwest Ballet, in their professional division. So, yeah.
Nice. So Destiny, tell us about some of the biggest shifts that has occurred for you in regards to dance since you're moving to the West Coast at a very young age, by the way, 9 years old. That's a pretty big shift at such a young age. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that and maybe any challenges that presented itself.
Mhm. Yes, so I think the biggest challenge for me just was honestly deciding to focus on ballet because I hadn't really before. Like I took ballet class, but it's so different when you are like, okay, I'm gonna be like a ballerina, like I'm gonna be a ballet dancer. That's a whole different type of mindset and like just classes, that amount of classes you have to take, and specifically for ballet. So I did a lot. I was doing like tap, jazz, and hip hop and all of that stuff, and I think that was probably the hardest shift because ballet was never really my strong suit. I felt like it was, and I think that's what made it so interesting for me because I was like, why can't I do this well? I'm like, why is this step so hard for me? And I think that's another reason why I love ballet as well, because you're always growing, and you're always learning something new. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know what? You bring up such a good point, and it really dives into the depth of things pretty early on in our chat, but I don't want to forget it. This idea that you're always growing. A lot of dancers, especially in the ballet world, are perfectionists. I know I struggled with this myself, and I think there's a certain degree of perfectionism that can help to motivate dancers, but there's also a major degree of it that can be very limiting on dancers. And I think hearing from you the idea that you are always growing as a dancer, even with ballet, even though it's so structured and there's a certain uh, you know, technical form that we want to achieve, and there's just it's almost like definitive but not really, right? We're still always learning. Choreography is can always take different shapes, and I think that's so important to realize because this idea of perfecting the art is pretty impossible.
Right.
So a lot of dancers face a ton of challenges in their pre-professional training is what I'm focusing on now. Any specific challenges that you face that maybe you want to chat about and maybe some ways that you were able to overcome those challenges?
I think I struggled a lot with it, especially not so much now. I mean, it's still there a little bit, but comparison,
Mm,
for that was really hard. Just especially because, and not just in ballet in every style of dance, but because the ballet world is so small, so tiny. You see the same people at different types of auditions everywhere you go. It's hard to not compare, or even if within the age group that you're in, like comparing yourself to people who might be older than you, because in the audition room, like that doesn't matter, honestly. Like, the age, you don't know their age, so you're kind of like
mhm,
comparing, like, oh, this person's really good. Like, how can
mhm.
so I think that's a big thing, and I still struggle with it a little bit. It's getting better once I've been really focusing on my self-confidence lately. So I think really focusing on that helped me a lot. Just thinking about what I have to bring to the table, and honestly thinking about my differences, like
Mm.
not necessarily comparing myself to people, but being like, you know what, I dance differently from you, and that's okay because you bring something to the table and I bring something different. And so just trying to kind of spin it into a more like positive outlook.
Yeah, that's such a great perspective shift to actually just own up to the fact that there are differences, that we all can have differences. And it's, what's so difficult about ballet, especially if we're dealing with something like a corps de ballet, right? To a certain extent, you're the art is looking for certain elements that would be, dancing together, being within the music together. But in order to, and I talk about this a lot, in order to really transcend an audience, I feel that we need a certain level of depth. And the only way you're going to get that is through individuality and diversity and bringing what you personally have in experience to the stage. And everyone's personal experience is different. But a lot of dancers can really hyper focus on the art, right? And become very self-centered in regards to like their lives only being about ballet. How do you find balance as a ballerina elsewhere in your life?
Mhm. Well, I just honestly, I lean on my family like for support.
Mm-hmm.
It's times because we are dancers, right? And it's what we do with most of our day, but we're still human, and we have to find. I mean, a dancer's career is pretty short, so we have to find like outside sources of happiness. I think for me, that's mainly just spending time with my family. I'm not with them much at all, so when I get the chance to be, I really want to because I feel like I miss so much, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that they've missed so much of my life. So just being with them really helps me. Also, I really, it's kind of off topic, but I really want a pet. I really want a dog.
Oh, sure.
That happens, Mom, if you're listening. um,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, because I feel like pets bring such a like joy and just happiness and just something, go on a walk with your dog or whatever. But anyways, yeah, I just think family for me has been really nice, and then also being with my friends too, and just kind of not talking about dance all the time or not stressing out like we're doing Nutcracker, and that's on our minds. But like we try to just put support each other, motivate each other, push each other to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I love about when you're mentioning having a dog, truth be told, wearing that hat as like a dog mom is adds a whole new element to who you are as a person, right? Like being a mom, whether it's for me, I have two kids, that has added so much new experience into my life where it's like it's literally impossible to hyper focus on whether that be body image, whether that be food, whether that be ballet. The same thing goes for if you have a pet, bringing in that those new hats, those new um I guess roles in our life play such a huge role in
Right.
what we're bringing to the table. So my next question for you is more related to food. Was there ever a time in your training, whether it's like pre-professional training or professional, where you started to put pieces together and say like, the foods that I'm putting into my body are having some bit of an effect on my performance?
Definitely. I think for sure when I moved to LA
Mm-hmm.
and started my like kind of professional training, I didn't I'm from the South, so
Yeah.
we eat. And for me, I eat what will fuel me. I eat what gives
Yeah.
me energy. And whether that's a salad that day, like before a rehearsal, or an acai bowl, or some meat and whatever it may be. But I think for me, it was probably when I moved to LA and I just started realizing that there were other options for me. I think that was the biggest thing. I maybe when I was younger, I didn't see all those options and the
Yeah.
different things I can do with my body and how that would be affecting me until I had that opportunity to see kind of outside my box.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I definitely can relate to that on a personal note. I remember when I first moved to New York City and I was kind of introduced to all of these different foods that I wasn't not necessarily not familiar with, but didn't realize they were so, I guess, in or like what you were saying what diet culture would deem as being healthy. And I remember like just being very overwhelmed in this new city, having all of these new options at my fingertips. And I get that, just that kind of being the introduction to food and the different options, and especially you're at a younger age, it had to have been a little bit overwhelming in regards to like how do I fuel my body. But one thing that you said that I absolutely love is that you have a very intuitive approach in regard to how you're feeling, and then basing that off of how your performance in of itself. It's like if you're feeling like you're having like a crunchy refreshing salad versus having maybe a denser option at one point, it sounds like you have a more of an intuitive approach around that.
Yes. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I think it's really about because everybody's different. Like I said, it kind of goes back to the comparison thing. Like you can't
Yeah.
especially with food. Everybody, like we were saying about dancers in general, everyone's different. And like, same thing, what they put in their body might not be what you want to put into your body. Or if they're vegetarian or vegan or whatever it might be, that might not be the best situation for you. So I think that's hard too, trying to block out, oh, well, this person's doing this, so I should do that. I don't know. So I try to block that part out and think about myself. And like you said, go off of how I feel and what I feel
Yeah.
I need.
Yeah, one thing I talk about a lot is really turning in intrinsically instead of focusing too much on like the external forces around us, which is not easy for dancers, especially when they're pre-professional in those in trainee programs, because you are with the same dancers like 24/7, right? Basically eating your meals together, dancing together. Most often you're also sleeping in the same quarters together. So it's you're around together a lot. It's hard not to compare, but it is also super important to stay focused on your own path and what works for you and your individual body. I want to shift the conversation a little bit. How were things during the quarantine? How were you able to stay motivated? Were you able to stay motivated? How'd that go?
Wow. Well, I had a I did, I did PMB summer course on Zoom. And that I got a program from there. So that was shocking. And then I did my first year of PD. We were in the studio a little bit, but majority of it was at home. And so I have like a small apartment, and I had a roommate at the time, and we split the living room, which is not that big, and we both had like two boards of like wood, and had like our separate Marley, and we were using two. It was crazy. I
Mm-hmm.
think for me though, what I learned, honestly, it made me take a step back and look at other aspects of my life, because sometimes I get so hyper focused on dance is this, dance is this. Okay, I need to go and do, and like I get in this routine of like dance, dance, dance. But there's other parts of my life that I wanna, that I should be thinking about, and that I feel like maybe I was neglecting a bit more, whether that's like my family or whatever it may be. And so for me, I think what I learned from it was to not neglect those small things. And also like it really honestly Zoom for me helped me work on my technique, because
Mm.
we like sometimes I feel like when you're performing, it's more of just like, okay, just get to your mark, get the step and dance, you're on stage, lights, camera, like rehearsals. Um, and I think kind of having to be at home and in a small space, I had to think about the small things, which are the only things I could do. I couldn't do Grand Allegro in my
Mm.
living room. Couldn't, do all the craziness. So I think for me, like I was really focused during bar, like just little things, fixing little tiny things like that. But
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perspective also, Destiny, in the sense of Zoom being actually something that helped you. Just from a general standpoint, it being almost forcing us to have to focus on our technicality and focus on our strength building in in comparison to when you're really in that performance mode, and a lot can fall to the waistline when you're so hyper focused on like a certain set of choreography that you're working on. You know what I mean? You kind of like lose touch with some other technicality aspects. So I think that's super interesting. Destiny, my next question I have to ask: how was life on set for This Is Us?
it was amazing job I ever, because I would do like background work, which is so different from your like, I mean, I didn't have any lines, but like I was a featured role. Um,
Sure.
it was crazy. I had like a trailer, like, and I just felt so I felt so cool. I don't know. Everybody was nice. And I didn't get to meet any of the, stars of the show because they weren't in
Mm-hmm.
the season. But if having to do those sweatés multiple
Yes.
times, different angles was fun. um, but I really enjoyed it. Oh my gosh, I would love to do it again, because it was just a whole different experience. And I think I was so happy because like acting is really fun for me. Obviously dance is what I focus on, but like being able to incorporate like what I do every day, what I love to do, into something that is just so like fun and cool and new for me was just really exciting.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Oh my gosh, so cool. Just so cool. Being in the trailer alone on set is so cool. That's awesome. And I totally agree with you. Bringing in this aspect of acting can be very, even if again, there was no like any specific lines per se, being in this new setting can be super challenging for dancers, right? That are, very used to not expressing themselves only through movement. And I think being on film just adds a whole new layer of challenges for dancers, which, from what it sounds like, was just such an incredible experience.
It really was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Destiny, the final question I have for you is something I ask all of the dancers on here. I would love to hear how you would define what it means to be the healthy dancer.
How I would define being the healthy dancer would be listening to yourself and
Mm-hmm.
doing what you feel is best, not what other people are doing, but listening to your body, what you want, especially when it comes to food, what you want to eat, what you feel like eating, and yeah, really just listening to yourself, I would say. Because I think, like we were talking about earlier with comparison, it's so hard when people around you are like, oh, well, like, I'm not gonna eat that. Nah, I don't, it's like, okay, I understand, like, that's for you, though. You have to figure out what you want for yourself. And I think, especially when it comes to like a busy season like this, like Nutcracker, you really have to listen to your body because your body gives you signs. That's why our body is our instrument, right? So we have to take care of it and treat it well because we can't expect it to do all the crazy things, the unnatural things that we're asking it to do without fueling it properly.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. And one thing in regards to treating it well, maintaining the whole aspect of our well-being, right? Balancing our physical, our mental, and our emotional. And one thing we know is that when we are restricting ourselves, when we are overly comparing ourselves to others, it's definitely going to just take away from our mental and our emotional well-being.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, Destiny, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you tonight. You've given us such wonderful insight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was nice meeting you.